Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today's video is going to be a little different than what you might be used to in a sense here. In patch 11.1 and for the foreseeable future, I want to expand at times to a bit more general content. So today, this video is going to be a patch 11.1 PTR DPS spec tier list for M plus rankings, everything heading into the actual patch release, which is in less than 10 days. Now, this is my first tier list I've made in a very long time, so number one, bear with me here, cut me a little slack. Number two, like I said, we're going to try and be expanding to more general content while still doing Warlock stuff in the future, obviously not leaving that behind. But if you guys want to see more or in general support the stream, or I guess the channel here, be sure to smash the sub button below, it helps out a ton. Now, a lot of this actual rankings here is based off my own experience running M plus on PTR and just the general vibes of other classes have been talked about in chat, so on and so forth, and all of that. Now, I will admit, when my hair is poked up here, I don't know. I will admit that I have not played with every single class. We're going to rank ranged here and then get into melee in the second half of the video. I guess Marks is technically part of range. We'll drag them down here as well. Now, I want to also emphasize that it is currently February 17th. This can all change with any tuning whatsoever, and I expect there to likely be more tuning the closer we get to release, even though PTR is marked as release candidate. Now, in no particular order here, just threes down here below, we're going to start off with Augmentation Evoker. Now, honestly, there's been talk about Augmentation maybe not being meta every single season, you know, for a handful of reasons, but let's be honest here. We all know Augmentation is going to be an S tier and likely one of, if not the highest ranked S tier specs out there. The fact of the matter is, Augmentation brings unique utility, blistering scales, breath, swords of magic, also bring a lust, insane utility, and honestly, with the shift in their damage profile heading into 11.1, no longer buffing tanks or healers, but doing more damage on their own as well, they look incredibly strong. The utility they bring is unique, and it gives you that extra push, you know, to be able to push with higher keys. Groups with an AUG, whether you're tanking or DPSing, versus groups without an AUG, there's a good bit of a difference there. You can feel it, you can see it, and once again, with AUG doing a good bit of their own damage in general, they look to be very competitive in S1, and I would say, starting off at the top here, starting off very hot in the S tier position. Now, when it comes to Shadow Priest, I played with a couple on PTR, and it's been sort of hit or miss. I know they've received a handful of changes and have gone through some ups and downs over the past few weeks and things, but I've seen some saying that Shadow Priests are all the way up in S tier, and they're definitely part of the meta comp. And I've seen some saying Shadow Priests are as low as like a B tier rank, and I think that there are a couple things that come into play here. Number one, Shadow does bring utility. They bring, you know, fort, they bring PI, but at the same time, you know who else brings that? Is Disc Priest. Disc Priest is going to be, at least currently, you can ask Jack and anybody else, the best healer, arguably one of the best healers, I think the best currently, in M plus comps heading into patch 11.1. That coupled with the fact that in very large pools, Shadow Crash can be a bit limiting in things, and depending on their profile, comparatively to like maybe a Destro Lock, which has this mass AoE and can melt everything down, I don't think personally they're in S tier. I think they're probably sitting somewhere around the lower end of A plus tier or the higher end of A tier. Now, tuning can very well come over the next few weeks, and depending where that goes, I mean, I assume we get some probably this week, probably the week of release, and even after the raid comes out on March 2nd, I believe. I'm going to put them on the higher end of A tier here, but I think it's quite possible they could jump up into the lower end of A plus tier, depending on where comp goes, depending if another healer emerges that you want maybe above Disc Priest. But at this current point in time, I would give probably an A ranking for Shadow here. Now, as far as Affliction Warlock's concerned, honestly, Hellcaller is very, very good this tier in the raid, in Mythic Plus. It's good in general. Hellcaller is one of Warlock's hero talents for both Affliction and Destruction. Now, Affliction's damage, I think, has been in M plus and like Spread Cleave, has been sort of slept on in a sense. It has similar limitations to Shadow Crash or Shadow Priest, where Vial Taint only applies to agony to 8 mobs. It's a little buggy where it doesn't even apply to your main target at times. The ramp up time's abysmally slow. Quality of life is basically non-existent for Affliction Warlock. That being said, Hellcaller is strong, Wither is strong. In pulls on the upper mid tier to higher end, where you can get a lot of raw value where packs live for a while, Affliction's actually pretty strong. It has a 1 minute damage profile window with Malevolence, giving you that 1 minute profile, a larger 2 minute one with, you know, Dark Lair, minute with Soul Rot, so on and so forth. I think Affliction can likely sneak into like the higher end of the B tier, but when you have things like Destro or even Demo with the quality of life being much higher and the profile being better, the tier set being better, it's just sort of not as competitive. Affliction's tier set, the 4-piece, is probably the worst one raw damage wise in single target of any class I've seen in the last 10 years until it's buffed. It'll probably be buffed. And in AoE, it's sort of lackluster as well. So I'm going to put Affliction currently in B tier, on the higher end of B tier, with a chance to go higher. But when you're looking at specs like Demo or Destro, which are better, and we'll get to that in a little while here, you got to sort of think, well, is it worth the quality of life or lacking quality of life playing Affliction Warlock in M+. Now, when it comes to Beastmaster Hunter, they've gone through a handful of ups and downs over these past few weeks. They were bugged for a while. They were melting the world, destroying everything. Then they got nerfed a bit. They were still bugged. From what I understand right now, they have been nerfed. I believe there was, they nerfed the tier set. They nerfed, I think I have it here somewhere, Bestial Wrath, I think was nerfed. A couple other things. They nerfed the tier set. They nerfed, Beast Cleave was nerfed. It was 90% the effectiveness. Now it's 80. Kill Cleave effectiveness was reduced to 80, was also 90. A couple bugs were fixed as well. I've played with a handful of BM Hunters on PTR post changes, and they're still strong, but they're not as strong as they were before. Bugs being fixed, tuning being fixed. I do think that BM currently is still S tier. They are very consistent with what they can do AoE wise. They're not relying on mass CDs to melt the world like some classes have been in the past. Their damage profile is strong, efficient, and consistent in M+. The CDR they get on random, Bestial Wrath and things feels nice. It's a fun spec to play. Mobility is obviously there. They have no spells they can't cast in the move, basically. I'm a little jealous, play a Warlock here, but putting that aside, I do think BM is S tier, but at the same time, I think BM could possibly lose that position and go to A+ tier, depending on how the rest of the meta comp shakes out, because BM Hunter in general doesn't really bring as much to a raid comp or a dungeon comp as, say, a priest does with Fort and PI, a mage with Arcane Elect and Infinite Utility, an Aug Evoker with everything, right? Hunter's Mark, not very strong at M+, you're putting it on one target. They can bring Lust, but you're going to have a mage or a shaman somewhere in your group comp spurs ahead regardless, so they're in S tier. I think a lot of it is due to their damage profile. We'll see where it goes, but when this fills out, they're probably on the lower end of S tier, but don't get me wrong, they are still good, they are still strong, and should not be slept on heading into patch 11.1. Now, when it comes to Destro Warlock, I have a bit of a biased take on this because I play Warlock, but Destruction Warlock I think is S tier at this point. It is the very high end of A tier possibly, but more than likely probably S tier. Now, Warlock does bring a good bit of utility in a sense with Hellstones and Soulstones and Gateways. Now, they're not incredibly impactful in M+ comparatively to raiding. I will say that Gateways, this tier might be a little more impactful with things like Workshop, Floodgate, you can skip a handful of things, other dungeons as well. Also, Gateway is a little more useful. Hellstones are relevant. Battle Res, most classes have it at this point. Some CC and AoE like with Shadow Fury. More pet interrupt utility or more pet utility than you have with Demonology, but the damage profile they bring is exceptionally strong in mass uncapped AoE. Cataclysm, our spell that applies Wither to everything, which is also part of Hellcaller, is uncapped for what it applies Wither to. If you cast Cataclysm on a pack with 2 mobs in it, it's going to apply 2. If there's 2 million mobs in one pull, for whatever reason, it's going to apply 2 million Withers. And every single mob gets hit, and you pop Malevolence, and they all flare up, and the world melts. You can throw Random Fires in there, which fuel more Shard Gen, through Reign of Chaos, with more Infernals coming down. And it's a cycle of synergy. It's how Destro's been for a very long time. It's not the same as it was back in, Dragonflight early on, when you had, a million Random Fires being spammed. Talents have shifted, but it does feel similar. Now, a lot of your profile is based around Wither and Blackened Soul and Malevolence. Malevolence being a 1-minute cooldown. And the damage Destro brings is very consistent as well. You have Cataclysm every pack. You have Channel Demon Fire every pack to do a bit of cleave damage, but extend Withers that are active too. On top of that, your tier set brings a decent bit of cleave whenever it procs. It's a little bit of, I guess, single target-esque damage as well with the Mastery buff and CDF cleaving. But overall, if you want a mass AoE spec, Destruction Warlock is your best option in the game, barring any spec. It is exceptionally strong in mass AoE in the higher keys. In lower to mid-tier key range, Destro's sort of fine. It's mid. If you're running 6, 7, 8 keys, I'd probably put Destro somewhere around here, lower end of A+. But the higher you go with that Cataclysm, Wither, Malevolence, Synergy, all of that, it definitely is the best AoE spec in the game. And I don't think much really even comes that close to it. BM can come close for sure. Other classes can as well with burst damage getting into that 20-ish second mark in a larger pool. The longer that pull goes, Destro pulls further and further and further ahead with that mass AoE. So Destro, definitely S tier. We'll see where it goes. Fits the actual comp pretty well here too. If you're playing Aug and maybe some kind of priest, like a disc priest with PI. Malevolence, minute cooldown, Infernal 2 minutes. Fits the comp pretty well. But in the end, we will see where that goes. Now, as far as Devastation is concerned, so the issue with Devastation, almost similar to like Shadow and Disc in a sense, I'm going to put it in A tier here, is that the damage is fine. They've been buffed a handful of times over the past few weeks over PTR. They got I think a 4% aura buff this week, if I can find the notes here. I think they got a 4% buff, and that was it. Yeah, 4%. They've gotten a handful, I believe, over this tier. Now, Evoker has a lot of utility, right? The class has the most utility of any class in the game. But the problem is, why would you bring a Dev when you can bring an Aug? Aug brings even more utility, blistering scales, source of magic, Ebonite buffing. I mean, realistically, Ebonite buffing the 2 best DPS in the game makes them even better. And they're doing a lot of damage on their own as well. Aug has been meta since its inception, and it's probably going to be, because it's the only class in the game that can bring that amount of utility. They've made it so Aug doesn't buff tanks or healers anymore, but you're still bringing blistering scales, source of magic, Ebonite to the best 2 DPS in the game, making them, substantially the best 2 DPS in the game, whatever the comp ends up being. You're doing a lot of damage on your own, plus all the utility they have, cauterizing flame, just insane mobility. I don't really see a reason as to why you play Dev over an Augmentation Evoker. That being said, Dev's profile with aura buffs coming in is solid. A lot of solid single target, solid prio cleave, solid stat cleave. It's sort of similar to how Demonology Warlock feels in a sense. You've got good stat cleave, good prio cleave, and all that. Better utility, lust as well, if you want to throw that in, I guess, essentially. But overall, I just don't see a reason as to why you bring a Dev when it comes to like M+ meta comps and things over an Augmentation Evoker for Evoker Blizzard heading into patch 11.1. Now, when it comes to Fire Mage, Fire and Frost have been in an odd spot these past few weeks. Odd spot meaning they both... Okay, let's put it aside. Fire Mage is very good. Mage is insane in general. Whoever designs Mage, I want them to design every other class in the game. They have whatever you want. You want a Battle Res, we'll play an Engineer, you got it. You want a Cheat Death, you got it. You want a Lush, you got it. You want a Ray Buff, you got it. You want a Blink, you got it. Invisibility, Mass Invisibility, you got it. You want to shield your group, you got it. Mage is the god spec of this game. Rant aside, Fire looks to be very good. Good execute, good single target, good cleave, solid CD profile with Priest, and just the comp that is likely going to be there somewhere in general, being Aug XX. Mage has, in the past, filled that gap pretty well, and can fill that spot pretty well, and looks to continue to fill that spot pretty well heading into later parts, or I guess, 11.1 launch and going from there. Now, on top of that, if you also, let's say for some reason Fire gets nerfed, Frost is actually looking very strong as well. I was doing a dungeon a few days ago where there's a Fire and a Frost Mage, and Fire ended up coming out on top by a little bit, but Frost is not to be slept on either. Frost brings, the same utility for the most part. You don't get cauterized, but you have immunities, invis, mass barriers, just a lot of group utility, lust, arcane intellect, and comparatively to like Hunter, bringing Hunter's mark, AI looks to be a little bit stronger. Frost also fitting the damage profile of Aug and things relatively well. BM and things being up here more for the raw damage they bring, but Frost is not bad either. Not in the slightest. I'm putting it in A tier and likely on the higher end of A, or A+ tier, and likely on the higher end of A+ tier. But it's important to keep in mind that tuning may still come. It will still come over these next few weeks, and depending where it all lands, I could see Frost and Fire possibly swapping spots here, depending what the comp needs, the group needs, what the meta shifts to. Both specs look very good. Frost is on the outside looking in, but honestly, in groups I've had Frost Mages, they've been very, very strong. And when you're comparing it to like a Destro Lock in that mass AoE, Frost felt arguably more consistent in those like mid-tier, 5, 6, 7 mob pulls. When you got to those 2-pack pulls, 7, 8, 10+ mobs, yeah, things like Destro, like BM, like Fire pulled a bit ahead. But I've seen a lot of Frost Mages keep pace with BM Hunters as well. And once again, with BM being good damage-wise, but not much utility, there's a world where it even could possibly be a thing. So, now, Demonology Warlock. I think Demonology's tier bonus is being slept on. I think it's the strongest one out of all 3 Warlock tier sets. Demonology is known for a stat cleave profile. Now, similar to Destruction and Affliction, you bring Healthstones, Soulstones, Gateways, that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. Demonology's pet utility is a bit lacking compared to Destro and Affliction. Demonology brings the Felguard, Axe Toss, half-minute cooldown. It's a stun, or on the kick. It's basically a stun, not a full spell lockout and things. No imp for dispels, no dog if you want like purges and things. Now, Demonology's profile, like I said, has been known to be very good for stacked, consistent cleave. Demonic Strength, Fellstorm, Handed Gul'dan, just passive damage or passive spells that are part of like your toolkit, your profile that you just cast to fuel other parts of things, cleave. The Felguard cleaves, Panic Gul'dan, Dogs cleave, they cleave passively. Your tier bonus this tier spawns in a greater Dreadstalker, a bigger one from Legion. You can have multiple dogs active again now that Dread Bite whenever you cast Hand Gul'dan, and it triggers the big dog and the smaller dog, like dogs plural, chomping at the same time. It brings an exceptionally strong stat cleave profile. I've played Destro like versus Demo, like 2 locks at M+, and Demonology is, I would say, honestly, pretty much hands down, the more consistent Warlock spec when it comes to damage. It reminds me a lot of BM Hunter when like you're looking at having CDs every pack. You've got Demonic Strength every minute, Dreadstalkers every 20. Your tier set is tied to your Tyrant, so it procs every minute. On top of having random procs in general, you can implode whenever you want. The consistent nature of Demo's profile and the cycling that it has definitely puts it on the higher end of A play here. Now, the pet utility being a little lacking, overall class utility, not having a raid buff really, but having like, Healthstones, Soulstones, and I guess Gate in a sense, there is some relevance there, but it's not like augmentation level of utility or, mage level of utility, right? Plus, once again, on the high end of keys, when you're running like, like legit higher end keys, 16, 17, 18, so on and so forth. When you're pulling multiple packs in a coordinated setting, Destro Lock does begin to leave Demonology behind in that mass AoE consistent profile. When you can spread mass withers with a Cataclysm, extend them all permanently, which is much better than what AF can do with Vile Taint, and go from there. So with that being said, I'm putting Demonology in A tier. I think it could sneak into the lower end of A+ tier, similar to how S1 has been, with Demolock being I think a bit sleeper, but I think also Demonology ends up having a pretty high. It's easy to play on the surface, but much harder to optimally play when it comes to pet management, so on and so forth, on the higher end of M+. So with that being said, I'm putting Demonology in A tier here for 11.1 M+, but that could change up a little bit depending on where things go in the future with tuning. But also, once again, if you're playing a Warlock, why not just play Destro? Now, getting into the last 4 classes, or I guess specs we have here, we're going to have Ellie Shaman up next. Now, spoilers ahead, Enhanced Shaman is still very good. That'll be in the melee section coming up in a few minutes here. Ellie Shaman has been pretty strong from the keys that I've seen too. Strong limited damage profile, and well, I guess damage CDs and Stormkeeper and things. You do bring that Sky Fury buff, both like Enhanced and Ellie do. I think it falls under the same situation of like, if you can bring an Enhanced Shaman, which has that exceptionally strong profile, even after the nerfs they got recently, they're still pretty strong. Both Enhanced and BM were nerfed last week, but both still look to have a strong, consistent cleave profile. Single target looks very strong on Enhanced. I've been pretty strong with Enhanced post nerf. Not as strong as other classes, but still pretty high up there. BM being a bit less. I don't really see a reason as to why you would totally bring an Ellie Shaman over an Enhanced Shaman, but the ones that I have played with have been very strong. I put them on the like second rank of A+ tier. If Enhanced does get nerfed more, which let's be honest, Shamans had their time in the light over the course of season 1 and things. Ellie Shaman is right there. I think personally in the A+ tier, possibly ready to slot into the S tier depending on where Enhanced ends up. They do bring, like we said, Sky Fury, they bring Lust, a handful of other niche utility kind of spells. The best defensive in the game, Onk, I died. No, I didn't. Jokes aside, Ellie's damage does seem very strong, competitive, good 1-minute damage profile. So we'll see where they end up going, but currently at this point, I put them up in A+ tier. Sort of how Frost is on the outside looking in, comparatively to like Fire and Enhanced versus, Ellie here, but they're solid. And if Fire gets hit, Frost could be a thing. If Enhanced gets hit, Ellie could also be a thing. Now, when it comes to Boomkin, they're in an odd spot. They have a lot of strong, consistent AoE. You've seen it in raid testing. I've played with some in M+, and it sort of feels like the Destro Lock, in a sense. The longer packs live, their AoE is just strong. It's incredibly consistent. They have multiple charges of Incarn, which makes them very good on certain packs. You can head in, pop an Incarn on one pack, save for the next pack if need be. Their single target actually seems like relatively decent. The big thing though, utility too. Mark of the Wild, they got a battle res. They have, like Vortex or other random things they can use at times, which is albeit a bit more niche, typical Druid utility. The thing is, man, Druid just die. They die to everything. It's been a problem for a long time. Even 1-minute Barkskin hasn't really saved them. You can go bare form, but you can't sit bare form forever. Druids just die to a lot of things, and that battle res can't be used on yourself, unfortunately. So, yeah, it sort of reminds me how Devastation was like when it first came out. I think it was in 10.1 when they had one charge of Blistering Scales, and it was like for less damage negation than what it is now. They gave them a second charge. They have more damage negation. Just in general, Boomkin's damage seems solid. The utility they bring is good. I don't think it's as good as like Destro Lock in the high end for AoE. It's not. But they have certain elements of what you want to see in M+, but other things are just severely lacking. So I think they're like on the lower-ish end of 8, like probably like mid-tier here, probably above Dev, below Shadow, and below Demo here. Not horrendous, but not a class I'd be looking to bring when it comes to like, oh, building a meta comp, let's bring a Boomkin. Probably not going to be the case. When it comes to Arcane Mage, I mean, I'm going to probably just put him in B tier here. The damage output seems relatively mediocre. They've gotten some changes, I think, over the course of PTR. I can't keep up with the weekly major overhauls we get every single PTR build. Crickets. But yeah, they seem their damage just seems mediocre. They do still bring a lot of utility, like most mage specs do. They bring lust, they bring arcane intellect, which is very strong. But when you're comparing it to a spec like frost or fire, it's just subpar. It's like app versus demo or destro. You can play it, but like theoretically, I mean, why would you want to? You can do more damage, you know, in a more suiting damage profile for M+. Now, when it comes to marks, I'm gonna be honest, I could just leave them here. But we're going to put it here for now. I have not seen a single Marks Hunter in M+. Maybe one, and if I did, it was forgettable. From all I've heard, the damage is mediocre. The overhaul hasn't really been much of an overhaul in a sense. They're target capped, and it just seems like they're not really a contender for very much right now. I believe they were bugged during like week 1 and 2 of PTR. I put them in an odd spot, but for the most part, I don't think they're going to be incredibly competitive, especially with BM being the way they are. And I mean, yeah, that's what rounds out the range part of this video. Let's get into the melee part and try and form what looks to be possibly, maybe the meta comp currently heading into 11.1. All right, now getting into melee here, I'm going to say off the bat, melee is not my specialty. I don't love most melee specs in the game, but nonetheless, I have played with a good bit in M+ for these past few weeks, so this is going to be where I rank them. Now, Havoc Demon Hunter has been in a weird spot during this PTR. In raid testing, different from M+, but in raid testing, they were horrendous. They were really bad. They've gotten a handful of buffs. They got some, I believe, last week. I think there were some the week before. I actually have them here. I believe Havoc, yeah, a 5% aura buff. Blade Dance increased by 33%, and Militia Aura increased by 12. I believe they nerfed the tier set. Yeah, it grants 2% crit strike chance per stack. Sacrifice was 1%. Actually, that's a buff, if I can do my Florida math right. Their damage has increased substantially. They are not in A tier. I just put them here. Now, I've heard there are some bugs with Havoc. I don't know what they are exactly. I'm not sure, but the damage I've seen has been like, I would say around A+ tier, but I've seen some people even talking about them being part of like potentially the meta comp on the outside looking in. Now, Demon Hunter utility, not like amazing, but not horrendous either. A decent bit of like personal utility. Survivability is not bad. They do indeed bring Chaos Brand, which if you're in mostly a caster-esque based, you know, meta comp with like maybe a Shadow Priest or Fire Mage, Destro Lock, and all that kind of stuff, there is a bit of relevancy there. I do feel like they're probably more on the A+, probably ahead of Frost and Elemental because of like Frost having Fire being better, Antley having Spoilers ahead. Enhanced being better. On the outside looking in, I'm not sure where their bugs are going to be, what they are, if they get fixed, if there's like compensation buffs for that. Not really sure where it's going to be. They have the AoE stun, single target stun, some relevancy there too. I think there's definitely a chance for them to be part of the meta comp. I don't think it fits like a more caster heavy comp outside of Chaos Brand like exceptionally well, but at the same time, Brand is worth something. So I'm going to put them on the higher end of A+ here. Their damage has seemed pretty solid. But once again, I don't think it's like Destro Warlock level of insane and mass AoE. We'll see where it goes. Now, speaking of Shaman, Enhanced Shaman. I didn't forget it. Enhanced has been insane since like late beta of War Within, and they continue to be very good. Now, they got nerfed this last week, I believe. Let me see if I can find the nerfs here for you guys. They were nerfed this past week, and even with the actual nerfs coming in, they are still very strong. I can pull this up over here briefly for y'all. Hot Hands duration is 6 seconds, was 8. Ashen Catalyst now increases damage of Lava Lash by 8, was 12. A lot of nerfs across the board here to enhance. Some Stormbringer and Totemic tuning here as well. And overall, like once these nerfs came in, I've run with them like post nerfs, and they're still solid. Right? They still bring a lot of decent bit of utility. They bring Sky Fury. Their damage is consistent. It's strong. Good single target still. Good AoE still. I think they're still part of the S tier meta comp. I mean, honestly, I probably put them above Destro Lock. Destro is very, very strong on the high end, like I said. But when it comes to like that like mid tier getting into upper tier level of like possible like where Destro fits, I think Enhance and Fire are above Destro and BM right now. Probably like in this order, I would say roughly. The most consistent, the best universal is probably going to be Fire and Enhance. I would say probably currently, but once again, if things shift, or more so if you're pulling on a high mass AoE end, Destro is there too. And they're all still in contention for what is supposed to be like, you know, the meta comp. But Enhance, very, very strong. And once again, if Enhance gets hit, hey, just bring Ellie up there. Not as strong as Enhance, I'd say, overall, but has the same utility, mostly give or take. Relatively similar damage profile with Stormkeeper and all that. So Enhance is up there, but, you know, tuning may see. We'll see where it goes with tuning. Enhance has been good for a while, and, you know, if you know how Blizz tunes things, if you're good for a little while, like Warlock, well, you get blasted. Okay, jokes aside. Moving on to Survival Hunter here. Survival seems like it's in a decent spot. There were some buffs, I believe, this week to Survival. I think they increased... I can find it here for you guys as well. They increased, I think, cooldown damage. I mean, Survival, Flanking Strike increased by 30. Fury of the Eagle damage increased by 20. Fury of the Eagle now splashes beyond 8 units was 5. So a bit of a, you know, uncapping-esque of Fury of the Eagle. I'm not even totally sure what that is, 100%. I don't play Survival. It's Legion, but regardless, their damage has seemed okay in M+. It hasn't been, like, utterly insane. Hunter in that weird spot of, like, not really bringing much utility to a group, like no Arcane Intellect, no Sky Fury. Okay, CC, you know, some AoE stuns, some single target stuns, but like not incredibly high on the high end of like utility and damage, like you see Fire or Mage in general, Shaman being solid there too, Warlock even being okay in certain spots. Definitely not augmentation level of utility. Damage seems fine, but once again, it brings to question like, if you're going to play a Hunter, why not just play BM? It's consistent, the damage is good, you're at range versus melee, which I don't feel like often is better just in general. Why not play BM if you're looking to play Hunter over Survival? If you're a Survival fan, hey, lock in, do it to it. I'm a Demo fan. But yeah, probably putting him on the lower end of A tier here, but not like horrendous damage. You have some things that you bring, which, you know, we'll take that. When it comes to Fury and Arms, now, Warrior is one of the classes I am not incredibly clear on, so if you're a Warrior, don't hate me. I'm doing my best here, and that is that. Now, I know that Arms has indeed been buffed recently, and the damage looks to be pretty solid. Both Arms and Fury have been good when it comes to overall damage output, Fury being more target capped. And the unfortunate part about this season, there is a lot of dungeons where you are mass pulling things. I mean, Theater of Pain, Floodgate, Dark Flame Cleft, Rookery, Meteorite. There's so many packs that are like just these, like you can double pull and you're looking at 10 plus mobs. Things like Destro, Fire, Enhance, BM, the classes that aren't as capped and can do more like heavier AoE are looking better. Warrior does look very good damage wise. I'm throwing both of them up here. A plus and you know, AT here for Fury and Arms alike. Now, the thing is, sort of how Hunter is in a sense, they don't bring a whole lot of group utility. They're not bringing a Chaos Brand, they're not bringing Mystic Touch, they're not bringing AI, they're not bringing a Battle Rest, they're not bringing a Lust. They have like some stuns and things along the way that are okay, no poison removal or anything like that. And it puts you in an odd spot of like, yeah, your damage is good, but when you're looking at like that, wanting that damage profile and that utility, you don't really have that like you have with, you know, Mage or Aug or Shaman and all that. Damage is good. But when it comes like being part of the meta comp, you need damage and utility. And Warrior, I feel, is a bit lacking when it comes to that utility department. Trust me, I'm a Warlock. And when it comes to M+ utility, I've been there. Now, when it comes to Rogue stuff here, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even know the icons for Rogue. Thankfully, it shows the actual name right here over the thing. I know this is sub. That's basically it. There's 2 swords chopping for Outlaw and Assassination. When it comes to Outlaw Rogue, I believe Outlaw Rogue was the one that got the buffs. Outlaw got a 6% buff this past week. Now, from what I understand, Outlaw's been pretty subpar. I have seen like 1 Rogue in all of PTR M+ testing, and I don't really know like as to why that's the case. If people just aren't really like interested in playing Rogue, probably more than likely the damage output is pretty lackluster. I feel like Rogue, I mean, it doesn't really fit like the overall what is projected to be the meta comp that exceptionally well. They are pretty tanky, have a bit of utility in certain spots here and there. They're rogues. But I feel like Outlaw's damage output, from what I've read and seen, and things other tier lists as well, has been a little lackluster. I really haven't seen many. So like, honestly, if I was going to put some classes down here and use this row for like, in the end, unsure needs more testing, and not just like placeholders for the specs I haven't talked about yet, I would actually put Outlaw here. But I've seen people talking about it being a bit better. If there was like a B+ tier, I'd probably put it here, above like, you know, Assassin or AF and Arcane. With a 6% aura buff coming in, that's relatively substantial. You typically see 5 on the higher end, like 10%, 6 this early into PTR. There very well could be more buffs coming in, but at this current point, I put him in the higher end of B tier and just see where that ends up going in the long run. Once again, I don't know how it fits the actual meta comp. If it is like Aug Fire X, seems a bit, by either way. No like mass group buff or anything. But hey, we'll see where it goes. When it comes to Assassination Rogue, I've seen a lot of talk about them being like super solid when it comes to AoE, a bit lacking when it comes to single target damage. Once again, I mean, Assassination Rogue, Assassination, Outlaw, Sub, all being in a similar spot utility-wise, I guess, give or take a couple things. I just haven't really seen many in M+. I've heard the damage output is like solid, around like mid-ish A tier. I think A+ tier, and the higher you go, I mean, looking at like what classes are up here, barring arms being insane and simming for 100,000 DPS more than every other class in the game, right? These classes have a mix of like really strong damage and like utility, but it's like really strong, consistent damage, or like, a mix of good damage and pretty good utility. Fire Mage, Augmentation, Shaman, Mage, Demon Hunter being solid damage, solid utility on the outside looking in. And I feel like Rogue is just not there when it comes to like that insane damage or that, insane utility. It's sort of like a middle ground of both. So I mean, I'm gonna put like both Assassination and Sub in this A raid tier. We'll have to see where it goes. I heard there's some actual bugs, or there has been, at least with Sub's tier, working and not working. I'm not sure where it's going to end up in the long run, but both seem like they have potential. But at this current point in time, I think they're just outclassed by other classes with their raw damage profiles, and or utility fitting more what looks to be that meta comp heading into patch 11.1. Now, getting into the last few here, we have Ret Paladin. Ret Paladin has been interesting on retail. You see a lot of Rets at this current point in time. Short CDs, from what I understand. I haven't played Ret in a long time. I play Prot Paladin if I play any kind of Pally. But strong CDs, it seems like their damage is very... It's bursty, it's strong, but like the question is, how relevant is their damage at times? I wouldn't use the word like exceptionally like padded when it comes to a lot of their damage, but at certain points it does indeed feel that way. Single target can be good at times, but not as strong as other classes that are out there. But their short CD windows, I don't believe is changing in patch 11.1. I could be wrong. I have notes over here as well. I didn't see anything looking over changes. And when it comes to other things as well, like very, very tanky spec, very tanky class, blessings, bop, sacrifice, freedom, all that kind of stuff can be very, very good in M+ settings as well. Is their damage profile good enough to be part of A+ tier or anything else? I'd probably lean towards, I don't know why I'm moving marks here. I'd probably lean towards like no, but the very high end of A tier. And honestly, depending on where things go, I could see that change game being on the lower end of A+ tier. But once again, when it comes to A+ tier and or S tier, you're looking at like having a very strong damage profile, good tuning, and also having that utility that works well in the meta comp setting and or group based setting in M+. I think Ret's the higher end of A tier. You can make a case for lower end of A+ tier based on damage and short cooldowns, overall enjoyment, but enjoyment and meta don't always go together. I mean, let's be honest, who wants to play a BM Hunter? Not me. Windwalker Monk. Windwalker is also in a very interesting spot. I think they're also on the higher end of A here, close to being A+ tier, but just due to the fact that they're capped. Spinning Crane Kick was capped, I think, 3 or 4 patches ago. I think at 5 targets. I don't believe it's 8. I'm pretty sure it's 5. This season, like we talked about, is going to be a very heavy, I think, M+ AoE season. Looking at Dungeons, Theater of Pain, Rookery, Dark Flame Cleft in the end. There's a lot of... basically all dungeons have a lot of just heavy AoE, whether you're pulling, 2 packs together or 1 larger pack, and classes that are capped, looking at the same thing when it comes to Fury Warrior, Windwalker Monk. These classes that are capped, they just don't feel as good in these mass pulls versus these classes that aren't, like Destro, or just have like a very, very strong damage profile that's good in those settings, whether you use it for funnel damage or just mass AoE. It feels like Windwalker has, it's very tanky, has good utility, has Mystic Touch and stuff, whether it fits the meta comp or not, that's to be seen. But with it being capped in a heavy AoE M+ season, it's hard to say. I think it's at the higher end of A tier, probably maybe even the highest rank currently, with like Shadow being here for A tier. Readjusting a bit here, give or take. Very good single target from what I've heard and seen in, I guess, Discord and things looking around. Haven't seen a whole lot in M+ myself, but it looked to be solid, but not with that utility and damage that we're looking for in that high-end meta comp, at least from what I've seen. I'm going to be honest, when it comes to DK, brother, I don't play DK. Leave it up to Legend. I don't know. I've heard that when Frost has cooldowns, it's very solid and all that. It's solid, but consistency is the name of the game when it comes to damage profiles and things. And I've heard Frost damage is not very consistent. I've heard Unholy suffering from a similar scenario as well. They have good utility, good mob CC. They're very tanky in general. Don't bring like an incredible amount of utility outside of that. AMZ is solid. Obviously, there's that, and I think there are settings that where Unholy can be good. We're not looking at, you know, BFA days of festering, whatever that was, the Azurite trait being insane and plus, but Unholy's profile leaves a bit to be desired. Maybe that's the term, what I've heard and seen, but I haven't really seen many DKs at all M plus on PTR, and I don't know if that's indicative of it being just subpar or not very fun to play or a mix of both, but from what I've seen and heard as well, Unholy and both Frost are suffering a bit more. I've heard people are enjoying Frost a bit more than Unholy, but that's one of the classes that if I also had a bit more testing with, I would be happy with, but I'm going to put these probably up here in A tier and just say, hey, you know, it is what it is. This should be higher in the A tier list as well. Finally, when it comes to Feral, here's going to be my sort of going out on a limb kind of piss off chat and or viewers. I'm putting Feral in A plus tier. On the lower end, these rankings matter for the most part on the high end versus lower for my tier list. I don't know how most do it. This is my list here. Feral looks to be strong. The damage has been good. Even, I'm pretty sure, like, over the course of beta and S1, I've seen like 0 Ferals, albeit I haven't done keys in a while in retail, but Feral's damage has been strong. Now, they're tankier than Boomkins. They bring a good bit of utility when it comes to like their, you know, semi-niche Druid roots and, you know, mass spells, mass roots, vortex, all that kind of stuff. They also bring Mark of the Wild. Mark, that verse buff, very important when it comes to, very relevant if you can get it into like a, you know, more, I guess, focused group for M plus in general. Now, their damage profile, strong, solid. But are they as good as, like, say, maybe Elishan with their utility and like their arguably better damage profile, or like Frost Mage with their infinite utility? Well, Frost and Fire Mage with infinite utility. Are they better than that? Are they better than a Havoc Demon Hunter for raw damage output? Hard to say. Are they better than a Destro Warlock when it comes to like mass overall AoE with that uncapped Cataclysm, fueling more withers and I guess bigger withers and malevolence damage, more shard gen, so on and so forth? It's hard to say. I mean, well, the answer is no. Like for overall utility, but for raw damage, they're up there. I've seen a couple actually on PTR, and I've been surprised. They've competing. I don't know how to phrase that, with some of the higher end classes when it comes to raw damage. But when it comes to like that overall utility and how they mesh in a higher end group setting, that's where I think Feral is a bit lacking, and where that question mark sort of stands. I think their damage is A plus tier. It might not be as high as other classes in A plus tier, or if you're factoring utility, it might not be as high, but I'm gonna put them in A plus tier. And maybe I'm going out on a limb here. Maybe I'm wrong. We got to give the Feral something at some point. Let's be honest here. Who plays Feral Druid? All 5 players in the world. But jokes aside, I'm putting Feral in A tier. Now, when it comes to overall meta comp stuff here, I don't think this is like, I mean, obviously there are 5 slots here. No tank or healer. Prop Paladin, Disc Priest, probably looking to be your tank healer for S1. Vengeance Demon Hunter, didn't make a list here. Also looking pretty decent. Probably not as high as Prop Paladin overall, but when it comes to actual S comp tier, I would say that currently it is probably going to be Aug Mage X. Whether it's Enhance or Destruction Warlock or BM Hunter, I think the jury's still sort of out. I would likely lean a bit more. It's hard to say because this season is like really, it feels much more mass AoE based than last season was. So in that extent, you could put Destro maybe above Enhanced Shaman here with their nerfs and things coming in. Even with the bug to Destro's Demonic Inspiration talent, I believe, for Destro, you can just play CDF instead, and it's still very good. When it comes to BM versus everything else, I mean, BM doesn't really have a whole lot of group utility, right? Hunter's Mark sort of, I mean, not like good and plus, right? They have some CC and things like that. Very consistent damage profile, which is strong, but if you're making those high-end pulls at M+, like, you're probably looking more towards what a Destro Lock can bring damage profile-wise, or how consistent Enhanced Shaman is, plus Sky Fury, plus Lust, plus the utility, plus just general what Enhance brings comparatively to a Hunter. I think you're probably looking at, once again, Aug Mage X, and the X could probably be, possibly likely, Destro Lock or Enhanced Shaman. Now, this all may change. Once again, Havoc, Frost on the outside looking in, Fire gets nerfed. Hey, honestly, with what Mage brings, I could even see Frost hopping up here, just being like, hey, you know, it might not be as strong for like overall raw output compared to like Enhance or Destro in their optimal settings, but you bring literally everything. Invis, Mass Barrier, immunities, cheat deaths if you're playing Fire, Lust, a group buff and AI being very strong. Mage has that insane utility going forward as well. So at this current point in time, that's probably what I'd say is looking to be, probably what the meta shakes out to be. Prop Paladin, Disc Priest, Aug Evoker, Fire Mage, and X. I'd give probably a bit of a nod towards like Enhance over Destro, but Honestly, these are interchangeable. I wouldn't be surprised to see either here. BM also being very good too, but once again, just sort of depends on where its damage profile lands comparatively to Destro and Enhance, what you want on the higher end. So thanks for watching, guys. Wraps it up. That was probably a bit of a longer video than what I usually put out, but I appreciate y'all watching. Hopefully it helped y'all get a better idea of where things are at currently with this current point of tuning in 11.1 PTR. It is currently February 17th at 8 p.m. give or take. Now, changes can come at any point in time. PTR is marked as release a week ago, but it doesn't mean a whole lot nowadays anymore with tuning and things. I expect more tuning to come. If that's the case, I'll probably update this list a bit with winners, losers, and all that. I want to branch out a bit more this coming, I guess, patch and beyond to a bit more general WoW content while still obviously maintaining the overall like Warlock nature of the channel. I'm not leaving Warlock behind or anything at all. I think for growth and just general, my enjoyment too. Making tier lists and having more fun with M+ and all that is what I need to get into. So we're going to be doing that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, I'm sure to smash the like and sub buttons below. It helps out a ton. If you guys would like any of my weekly auras, add-ons, or profiles, which you didn't see in this video, but in general, links to my website up here, as well as down below in the description. And like always, a huge thank you to all my patrons for all support on Patreon, y'all. Thank y'all a million times. Like always, I greatly appreciate all support. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, should also be a link down here, as well as, up below. Like I said, I would expect more tuning this week. It could even be today when this video comes out. I'm expecting probably more towards the end of the week, like Thursday, Friday, and then likely tuning during patch week. And you obviously always have that tuning during Mythic week of the raid coming out, which keep in mind, this patch, everything's at once. There's no Heroic week anymore. You're getting Heroic, Mythic, S2 for M+, all at the same time on March 3rd, whatever Tuesday that is, if you're US, Wednesday if you're EU. So on and so forth. So should be fun. Thanks for watching again, guys, and I'll catch you again soon on stream. Peace.